when we think about future we's, when I say we now, I'm talking about the Center for Strategic Studies, which has actually done quite some thinking about these kinds of things. We talk about 4 layers, concentric layers around the core that constitute our overall defense and security efforts. So at the heart of the onion, the core of it is, of course, our armed forces. In our case, is the Dutch armed forces. Around it, we have an organization, which we call the Netherlands Defense Organization, which is, of course, our Ministry of Defense, but also cover other elements around it that are entirely military, that are entirely Dutch, and that are there to support the core of our armed forces. There's a third layer, which I think has become increasingly important, which is all the elements, governmental elements in the Netherlands that are responsible for defense and security. And those two terms are becoming increasingly intermingled. And I've been personally very encouraged to see in the Netherlands this onion becoming much broader and becoming much more organically interlinked. The start of that was, of course, the famous 3D, defense development diplomacy efforts around expeditionary warfare. But it's gone beyond that. We have a number of whole government efforts in which all government departments are trying to look, for instance, at the future risks that are out there and try to rank them in terms of probability and impact. And so increasingly, and I think the Netherlands, I think it's fair to say, has been relatively forward-leaning on many of these issues. I think increasingly there's a fourth layer that's increasingly coming into being and is being considered as a part of the overall system. And that is what we call the ecosystem. So it's a much broader array of actors that have both sensors and effectors that are not owned by defense, they're not owned by the Dutch government, but they could be used, they could be leveraged in order to achieve the security and defense political objectives that our governments have been given by our body's politic. So if we think about it in those terms, and as we navigate to a post-industrial age, might it not stand to reason that the broader effort of the ecosystem might become a more important part of our overall strategic portfolio? The interesting analogy here is, of course, also with the private sector. Just like Ministry of Defense, which only started existing in the industrial age, so too did companies, as we noted that they only started existing in the industrial age. And for the longest time during the industrial age, companies were inward-looking, because they wanted to have creative ideas that they then wanted to produce, manufacture, sell, follow. So it was a very inward-looking organization, linear organization, that tried to do things within its own boundaries. What has happened in the past decade or so is that many of these organizations have become much more outward-looking. There's even a term for that, which is a move from the stovepipe or the stovepipe company to the platform company, in which platforms not only do their own thing underneath, but in which they try to leverage the efforts of a variety of other ecosystem elements out there that they try to entice to come onto their platform in order to generate value for them, for these other elements, but also for the platform owner itself. You can think about things like Google Android or Apple iOS, but also a lot of more traditional manufacturing companies who are increasingly looking for open innovation outside of their companies to bring it inside, are increasingly looking for global supply chains with a variety of other, maybe more effective manufacturers who they can then bring again into their platform. Is it conceivable that defense organizations might start reorganizing themselves as we move to a post-industrial age along the lines of what we see happening in the private sector, whereby defense organizations increasingly become the catalyst of a broader ecosystem that we try to map, that we try to incentivize to do the types of things that work towards the security and defense objectives that we have as the Netherlands? I think that's the key differentiating element of the Future Force Conference 2017. It is about the changes around us. It is about new technologies that are out there. But I think it's also primarily about whether we have to increasingly not only be warfighters, operators, operate in the operational realm, whereby our defense organizations and with the armed forces at their lead, and that's why I'm encouraged that the Chief of Defense organizes this conference, where they become the catalyst of this broader ecosystem that, again, might be able to start producing defense and security value in different ways, in post-industrial ways. I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible next Thursday and Friday.